The twin sons of Varithra hammered down on the sea of shattered glass, a desert forged not from sand but from the pulverized ruins of 1,000 forgotten wars. Heat shimmered above the jagged dunes like a living thing, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage of blood and fire. In the center of this desolation stood a lone figure, Yarok. His boots were split, his tunic scorched and stained with dust and old blood, his face gaunt beneath a layer of grime. He wasn't a soldier by trade, not anymore. Once a scout for the free colonies, he'd been left for dead in this wasteland after his convoy was ambushed by the Iron Fangs, a mercenary legion known for their cruelty and their unbreakable spears, forged from meteoric iron and blessed in the blood of conquered worlds. Before him, arrayed in perfect formation across the cracked earth, stood the elite warriors of the Iron Fangs. Their armor gleamed obsidian black, etched with crimson sigils that pulsed faintly with stored energy. Each warrior held a spear identical to the one Yarok had just shattered, tall, cruel, and humming with lethal intent. At their head stood their commander, Valira. She was unlike any being Yarok had ever seen. Tall and statuesque, her skin the deep cerulean of twilight oceans, her hair a cascade of fiery red that seemed to defy the desert wind. Her eyes, sharp and golden like molten amber, locked onto his with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Around her shoulders rested a cloak woven from the feathers of sky serpents, and her armor, sleek, segmented plates of silver alloy, bore the scars of countless battles. Moments earlier, Valira had challenged him, not with words but with action. She'd hurled her ancestral spear, the Fong of Vorik, said to have pierced the heart of a dying star, straight at his chest. It should have impaled him, should have reduced him to ash on impact. But Yarok, driven by something deeper than survival, had caught it midair. Not dodged, not deflected, caught it. And then, with a roar that echoed across the dunes like thunder rolling through a canyon, he'd snapped it in half with his bare hands. Silence had fallen like a shroud. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Now the entire legion stood frozen. Their spears, symbols of their unyielding might, trembled slightly in their grips. To break the Fong of Vorik was not just an act of strength, it was sacrilege. Legend said only a soul marked by the old gods could shatter it, and only in defense of something pure. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Some lowered their weapons an inch. Others tightened their grips, torn between loyalty and awe. Valira stepped forward, her boots crunching on the glassy ground. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands, usually steady as stone, twitched at her sides. "You are no warrior," she said, her voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of command and the rasp of someone who'd screamed too many orders in too many battles. "You wear no armor, you carry no blade, and yet you stand where emperors have knelt." Yarok wiped blood from his split knuckles. His palms burned as if branded. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, voice rough but calm. "I came looking for water, for shelter. You attacked me because I walked too close to your campfire." A murmur rippled through the ranks. One of the warriors, a hulking brute with 4 eyes and tusks jutting from his lower jaw, snorted. "Liar! No man walks the glass wastes alone and lives." "I didn't say I was living," Yarok replied dryly, and despite the tension, a few of the younger warriors actually chuckled. It was a small sound, quickly stifled, but it broke the spell of fear. Valira's golden eyes narrowed. She studied him, the way his shoulders slumped not from weakness but exhaustion, the quiet steadiness in his gaze, the absence of arrogance despite what he'd just done. She'd seen conquerors, zealots, madmen. But this man, he looked like someone who'd lost everything and still refused to fall. "Why did you break my spear?" she asked, softer now. "Because it was coming at me," he said simply. "And I've had enough of things coming at me that I didn't ask for." She stared at him a long moment. Then, without warning, she dropped to one knee. The sound of her armored knee hitting the glass rang out like a bell. Gasps erupted from the legion. Spears wavered. Some warriors looked ready to revolt. But Valira raised a hand, silencing them. "I kneel," she said, her voice ringing clear across the battlefield. "Not because you defeated me, but because you chose not to kill me when you could have. The Fong of Vorik does not break for cowards. It breaks for those who protect, not destroy." One by one, the elite warriors followed. Not all at once. Some hesitated, some scowled. But eventually, the entire legion knelt in the dust, their spears planted point down into the earth in a gesture of surrender and respect. The sight was staggering. Hundreds of the galaxy's most feared warriors, bowing before a ragged man with bleeding hands. Yarrick didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just stood there, swaying slightly from fatigue, and said, "If you're done with the theatrics, I could really use a drink." Valira rose, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "You are either the bravest fool I've ever met, or the humblest hero." "Probably both," he muttered. She led him back to their encampment, a sprawling fortress of salvaged starship hulls and sandstone walls, built around a rare oasis where blue-leaf trees dripped condensation into a crystalline pool. As they walked, the warriors parted like a sea before them, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. Children, hybrid offspring of the Legion and local desert clans, peeked from behind tents, whispering his name like a prayer. Inside her command tent, lit by floating orbs of soft violet light, Valira offered him a goblet of chilled nectar from the sky orchids of Xylos. He drank it greedily, then winced as the cool liquid hit his parched throat. "You're not from the free colonies," she said, watching him closely. "Your accent, it's older. Pre-collapse." He set the goblet down carefully. "I was born on Illyria, before the Purge." Her eyes widened slightly. Illyria had been glassed a century ago, wiped from the star charts by the very empire the Iron Fangs once served. "Then you're a ghost." "Feels like it," he admitted. "I've been running ever since. Not from enemies, from memories." She sat across from him, her red hair catching the light like flame. "Why come here? The glass wastes are death to wanderers." "I heard rumors," he said slowly, "that someone out here was gathering survivors, building something new, not an army, a home." Valira looked away, her expression unreadable. "That was before the Fangs betrayed me, before they demanded I become their weapon again." She clenched her fist. "I wanted peace, but peace doesn't feed children or stop raiders." "Maybe not," Yarrick said, "but breaking spears might." She laughed then, a rich, unexpected sound that filled the tent like music. "You're impossible, and you're kneeling to a man who drinks like a dehydrated lizard." He shot back, and this time she laughed harder. Over the next few days, something shifted in the camp. Yarrick, despite his protests, was given a place of honor. Not as a prisoner, not as a commander, but as something in between. He helped repair water condensers, taught the children how to track sandstalkers by their heat trails, and even sparred lightly with some of the younger warriors, though he refused to touch a weapon. Valira watched him from a distance, intrigued by his quiet strength, his dry humor, the way he treated even the lowest servant with respect. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and the sky blazed with streaks of violet and gold, she found him sitting alone by the oasis, staring at the stars. "You miss it," she said, joining him on the stone ledge. "Illyria?" He shook his head. "I don't miss the place. I miss the people. My sister. She loved the rain. Said it washed the stars clean." Valira was silent for a long moment. "I never knew my parents. Raised by the Fangs from birth. Trained to kill before I could speak." She looked at him. "You think I can change?" "You already did," he said. "You knelt." "That was instinct," she whispered. "What if it was a mistake?" "Then we'll both be wrong together," he replied. And when he met her gaze, something passed between them. Unspoken, fragile, but real. The next morning, scouts returned with grim news. A fleet of the Crimson Maw, a rival warlord clan, was approaching. They'd heard of the broken spear, of the Legion's surrender, and they saw weakness. They came not to negotiate, but to burn. Panic spread through the camp. Some warriors wanted to flee. Others wanted to fight to the last breath. Valira called a war council, but before she could speak, Yarrick stepped forward. "They're coming for a symbol," he said. "Not you, not your people. Me, the man who broke the spear. They'll slaughter everyone," Valira argued. "Then we give them a show," he said, a glint in his eye. "But not the one they expect." He proposed a plan so audacious, so utterly mad, that even the most hardened warriors balked. Instead of fortifying the walls, they would dismantle them. Instead of hiding their children, they would place them at the front, with flowers in their hands. Instead of raising spears, they would plant trees. "It's suicide," growled the four-eyed warrior, now known to Yarrick as Torvak. "Or it's genius," Valira said slowly, her eyes on Yarrick, "because they expect warriors. They don't know how to fight hope, and so they prepared not for war but for witness." When the Crimson Maw arrived, their war machines rumbling like thunder across the dunes, they found not a fortress, but a gathering. Men, women, children, human, alien, hybrid, standing hand in hand in a great circle around the oasis. At the center stood Yarrick and Valira, unarmed, facing the oncoming tide of violence. The warlord of the Maw, a hulking reptilian with scales like rusted steel, stepped forward, laughing. "Is this your army? A garden party?" Yarrick stepped out alone. "We're not your enemy. You broke the Fong," the warlord sneered. "You shamed the old ways. You will die for it." "I broke a spear," Yarrick said calmly. "Not a people. Not a future." He held out his hands, still scarred, still bleeding in places. "Take my life if you must, but ask yourself, what will it prove? That you can kill a tired man in a desert? Or that fear still rules this galaxy?" The warlord hesitated. Behind him, his warriors shifted uneasily. They'd come for blood, but this was something else. Then, from the crowd, a child. A little girl with blue skin and human eyes, Valira's adopted daughter, stepped forward and placed a single white blossom at the warlord's feet. He stared at it as if it were a bomb. Silence stretched. The wind carried the scent of the oasis, cool, green, alive. Finally, the warlord turned and walked back to his machine. Without a word, he signaled his fleet to retreat. The camp erupted in cheers, but Yarrick didn't join them. He stood still, watching the dust cloud of the departing fleet fade into the horizon. Valira came to his side. "You did it." "No," he said softly. "We did." She took his hand, gently, as if afraid he might vanish. "Stay," she said. "Not as a guest. Not as a hero. Stay as someone who belongs." He looked at her, her blue skin glowing in the twilight, her red hair like embers, her golden eyes full of something he hadn't seen in years. "Trust." "I've been lost a long time," he said. "Then let's get found together," she replied. And as the first stars blinked awake above the sea of shattered glass, two souls, human and alien, broken and whole, stood side by side, not kneeling, not fighting, but simply being. Around them, the camp buzzed with life, with laughter, with the sound of hammers building not weapons, but homes. The war wasn't over. The galaxy still bled. But here, in this desert forged from ruin, something new was growing, tender, defiant, and bright. And it began with a broken spear and a hand held in the dark. Weeks passed, and the oasis thrived. What had once been a war camp hardened by survival slowly softened into something resembling a village. Tents gave way to domed huts woven from desert reeds and salvaged alloy. Children played where drills once echoed. The warriors of the Iron Fangs, still proud but no longer cruel, patrolled not as conquerors but as guardians. Yarrick taught them to read star charts not for ambushes, but for navigation to distant trade routes. Valira, in turn, showed him the ancient songs of her people, melodies that spoke not of blood, but of rivers that once flowed beneath twin moons on a world long drowned in cosmic fire. But peace, especially in the fractured rim of the galaxy, is never more than a breath held too long. It began with whispers carried on smuggler skiffs and coded pulses from dead satellites. The Crimson Maw hadn't retreated out of mercy. They'd been recalled by something worse. The Sovereign Concord, a resurrected Imperial faction thought extinct after the collapse, had risen again from the ashes of old war machines and forgotten archives. Led by the enigmatic High Arbiter Vexus, they preached unity through absolute control. Their doctrine was simple. All free settlements, all unaligned legions, all hybrid cultures like Valira's Oasis, were genetic anomalies to be cleansed or assimilated. And they had taken notice of the man who broke the Fong of Vorik. One night, under a sky choked with ash from distant orbital strikes, a cloaked figure slipped into the oasis. Not a warrior, not a spy, a woman tall, white-skinned, with hair like spun silver and eyes the color of storm clouds. She bore no weapon, only a data slate pulsing with encrypted glyphs. She asked for Yarrick by name. Valira intercepted her at the perimeter, spear in hand despite her vow never to raise it in anger again. "Who are you?" The woman bowed slightly. "My name is Lyrian. I was once a bioarchivist for the Concord. I defected when I learned what they planned to do here." Yarrick stepped forward, wary but curious. "And what's that?" Lyrian's voice dropped to a whisper. "They don't just want to destroy you. They want to replicate you. Your genome, Yarrick, it's not ordinary human. It carries dormant markers from the Illyrian ascendancy, a pre-collapse lineage engineered to interface with ancient terraforming cores. The Concord believes your blood can awaken the heart of Verithra, the planetary core beneath this desert, turning it into a weapon that could reshape entire star systems. Valira stiffened. The heart? That's a myth. Is it? Lyrian tapped her slate. A hologram flickered to life. A massive crystalline structure buried deep beneath the glass wastes, pulsing with slow, rhythmic light. The desert isn't made of shattered cities. It's made of failed attempts to control the heart. Every war fought here, every spear broken, every life lost, has fed it. And now it's waking. Yarrick felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. Why tell us this? Because I've seen the Concord's labs, Lyrian said, her storm-gray eyes glistening. They've already cloned you. 3 times. The clones are unstable, violent, empty shells, but they're close. And Vexus, she's not just an arbiter. She's your sister. Silence. Yarrick staggered as if struck. My sister died in the purge. Did she? Lyrian's voice was gentle now. Or was she taken? Rewritten? The Concord doesn't just kill enemies, Yarrick. They repurpose them. Memories surged. His sister Mira, small and fierce, dragging him through burning streets, her hand warm in his until a blast of plasma severed the world in 2. He'd never found her body. Only a scorched doll with one eye melted shut. Valira placed a hand on his shoulder. We don't know this is true, but Yarrick knew. In his bones, in the ache behind his ribs, he knew. The next morning, alarms blared. Not from scouts, but from the ground itself. Tremors shook the oasis. The glass dunes cracked open, revealing veins of glowing blue energy pulsing beneath the surface. The heart was stirring. And then the sky split. A massive dreadnought, sleek and obsidian, shaped like a scorpion's tail, descended without sound. Concord insignia burned along its hull. From its underbelly, drop pods rained down. Not filled with soldiers, but with machines. Biomechanical hunters with too many limbs and faces that shifted like liquid metal. They moved with eerie precision, bypassing warriors, heading straight for Jarrek's hut. He barely escaped, dragging Lyrian with him as Valira and her warriors held the line. Torvak fell, his 4 eyes wide with shock as a hunter's claw pierced his chest. But not before he crushed 2 of them with his bare hands, roaring a war chant that shook the trees. In the chaos, Yarrick realized the truth. The hunters weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to capture him alive. They need my blood to sync with the heart, he gasped as they fled into the tunnels beneath the oasis. Ancient aqueducts built by a civilization long gone. If they succeed, they won't just control Verithra. They'll turn it into a forge for an army of living planets. Lyrian nodded grimly. There's only one way to stop it. You must reach the heart before they do. But you can't go alone. The chamber is protected by resonance locks keyed to Illyrian DNA and emotional resonance. It won't open for rage or fear, only for sacrifice. Valira caught up to them at the tunnel's mouth, her armor cracked, her red hair matted with dust and blood. I'm coming with you. No, Yarrick said. You have to protect the people. And you think I'd let you walk into a tomb alone? She gripped his face, her golden eyes blazing. You broke a spear for me. Now I'll break a world for you if I have to. He didn't argue. He couldn't. They descended into the earth, the air growing warmer, humming with a low, melodic thrum that vibrated in their teeth. The tunnels widened into caverns lined with luminous fungi and murals depicting beings with wings of light and eyes full of stars. At the center of the deepest chamber lay the heart, a colossal crystal, taller than a starship, radiating soft blue pulses like a sleeping god's heartbeat. But they weren't alone. Standing before the heart, clad in flowing white armor edged with gold, was a woman who looked exactly like Mira, except her eyes were cold, her skin too perfect, her smile too still. Hello, brother, she said. Her voice was Myra's, but hollow, as if echoing through a void. Jarrek's breath caught. You're not her. I am better, Vexus replied. I am what she could have been, purified of weakness, of doubt, of love. She gestured to the heart. With your blood, we will awaken it. Together we will bring order to chaos. No more orphans. No more burning cities. Just peace. It's not peace if it's forced, Yarrick said. Isn't it? She stepped closer. You ran from war, but you brought it here anyway. Your presence turned this oasis into a target. Your kindness made them vulnerable. Maybe control is the only mercy left. Valira raised her spear, newly forged from salvaged heart crystal, glowing with inner fire. You don't get to decide what mercy is. Vexus sighed. I hoped you'd understand, Yerrick. But if you won't join me... She pressed a device on her wrist. From the shadows, 3 figures emerged, Jarek's clones. Their faces were his, but their eyes were empty pits. They moved in eerie unison, surrounding him. Kill the alien, Vexus ordered. Bring me my brother. The clones lunged. What followed was not a battle, but a nightmare. Yerrick fought not just enemies, but reflections of himself. His strength, his reflexes, his pain twisted into weapons. One clone grabbed Valira by the throat, lifting her off the ground. She drove her crystal spear into its chest, but it didn't flinch. It smiled with Jarek's face. Lyrian, watching from the edge, suddenly shouted, The heart responds to truth, not force feeling. Show it who you really are. Yerrick, bleeding from a gash on his temple, looked at Valira, her blue skin streaked with sweat and blood, her red hair wild, her golden eyes never leaving his, even as she choked. He thought of the children planting trees, of Torvak's last roar, of the white blossom at the Warlord's feet. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a relic. He was just a man who chose to care. He dropped his fists and walked straight toward his clone. The clone hesitated. Confusion flickered in its hollow eyes. Yerrick placed a hand on its chest, over where a heart should be. I forgive you, he whispered, for being made to hate. The clone shuddered. Cracks spread across its skin, glowing blue, collapsed into dust. The other 2 froze. Vexus snarled. Sentiment. That's your weakness. No, Yerrick said, turning to her. It's my strength. He walked toward the heart. Vexus tried to stop him, but Valira intercepted her, their spears clashing in a shower of sparks. Lyrian activated a pulse from her slate, disrupting the clone's neural links. They stumbled, disoriented. Yerrick reached the heart. He pressed his bleeding palm against its surface. Light exploded. Not violent, not destructive, but radiant. The chamber filled with visions. Illyria's reign, his sister's laugh, Valira's first smile, the children's songs. The heart didn't awaken as a weapon. It awakened as a witness. And it chose. Energy surged through the tunnels, up through the desert, into the sky. The Concord dreadnought systems failed. The biomechanical hunters collapsed, their liquid faces hardening into stone. Across Varithra, dormant oases bloomed. Glass turned to soil. Rain, real, impossible rain, began to fall on the sea of shattered glass. Vexus screamed as the heart's light touched her, not burning her, but unraveling her, peeling away the Concord programming, layer by layer, until only Mira remained. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Yerrick? She whispered, her voice real again. He ran to her, holding her as she sobbed. I've got you, he said. I always will. Above, the battle ended not with victory, but with awe. Warriors on both sides dropped their weapons, staring at the rain, at the green shoots pushing through the glass. In the days that followed, the oasis became a beacon. Refugees came not just from nearby systems but from across the rim. Humans, blue-skinned aliens, green-skinned traders with orange braids, purple-skinned scholars in silver robes, all drawn by the miracle of the awakened heart. Valira stood with Yerrick on a newly grown hill overlooking the thriving settlement. Mira, recovering slowly, helped teach the children the old Illyrian songs. Lyrian worked with engineers to build irrigation from the heart's energy, turning desert into farmland. You know they'll come again, Valira said softly. The Concord won't let this stand. Yerrick took her hand. Then we'll be ready, not with spears, with roots. She leaned into him, her red hair mingling with the rain. You really are impossible. And you really are magnificent, he replied. Far below, a child, blue-skinned, red-haired, with golden eyes like her mother, planted a seed in the wet earth. She didn't know it yet, but that seed would grow into a tree whose branches would one day cradle a new kind of civilization. One built not on conquest, but on connection. And deep below, the heart pulsed on. No longer sleeping, no longer weapon, but guardian. Watching, waiting, hoping. For the first time in centuries, the desert breathed. Months turned into a year, and the oasis, now called Elthar, the place where spears bloom, became more than a refuge. It became a promise. Trade routes once choked by war reopened under banners of woven blue and green, bearing not weapons, but seeds, books, and music. The Iron Fangs, once feared across 7 systems, now patrolled the glass wastes as peacekeepers, their armor reforged with heart crystal inlays that shimmered like captured starlight. Torvak's name was carved into the central memorial stone, not as a warrior, but as a father who gave his last breath so others could laugh. Yarrick and Valira rarely spoke of the future in grand terms. They built it quietly, in the way he taught her to graft desert vines that bore sweet fruit, in the way she showed him how to braid her red hair with strands of silver thread for ceremonies. Their bond deepened not through declarations, but through shared silences under twin moons, through the weight of a hand held during storms, through the quiet pride in each other's eyes when Mira, now healing, now whole, led the first interspecies choir in the newly built amphitheater. But peace, even when rooted in truth, must still be defended. The sovereign concord did not return with warships. They came with whispers, with lies. Rumors spread through the outer colonies that Elthar was hoarding heart energy, that Yarrick was building an army of clones, that Valira planned to enslave all non-blue-skinned beings. Fear, that oldest of weapons, began to coil around the edges of their fragile alliance. Then came the final test. A delegation arrived not from the Concord but from the free colonies, the very people Yarrick once served. They demanded access to the heart, claiming it was a shared galactic resource. Their leader, a sharp-eyed human diplomat named Corin, spoke with honeyed words but carried a neural disruptor hidden in his sleeve. He offered alliance, in exchange for control. Yarrick saw through it instantly. "You don't want to share the heart," he said, standing before the delegation in the open plaza. "You want to cage it." Corin smiled thinly. "Civilization requires structure, Yarrick. Even miracles must be regulated." Valira stepped forward, her presence commanding without a single weapon drawn. "Elthar is not a resource. It is a home, and we do not negotiate with those who see life as leverage." Tension thickened. The colony's guards shifted, hands near their holsters. But before violence could spark, Mira stepped between them, holding a simple clay bowl filled with rainwater from the heart's spring. "Drink," she said to Corin, "not as a test, as an invitation." He hesitated, then drank. And in that moment, the heart's resonance touched him. Not with force, but with memory. He saw his own childhood village, burned by corporate enforcers. He saw his daughter's face, lost to a plague the colonies refused to treat. He saw the cost of order. Tears streamed down his face. He dropped to his knees, not in surrender, but in sorrow. "I forgot what we were fighting for," he whispered. That day, the free colonies didn't take the heart. They joined it. Word spread faster than war ever could. Planet after planet sent emissaries, not to conquer, but to learn. How do you turn enemies into neighbors? How do you heal a world without erasing its scars? Elthar had no grand doctrine. Only practice, only patience, only people. And at the heart of it all stood Yarrick and Valira. On the first anniversary of the reign, beneath a sky streaked with auroras born from the heart's gentle pulse, they stood before their people in the central grove, now filled with trees whose leaves glowed softly at dusk. There were no thrones, no crowns, only a circle of stones, and the quiet hum of 1,000 hopeful hearts. Valira took Yarrick's scarred hands in hers. "You came here broken," she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "And you mended us all." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening like well-worn paths. "I was lost. You gave me a reason to be found." The elder of the green-skinned traders, her orange braids woven with white flowers, stepped forward with a ceremonial blade. Not of war, but of unity. She cut a lock of Valira's red hair and a strand of Yarrick's dark brown, braiding them together with threads of heart crystal and desert vine. "By sky and soil, by memory and mercy," she intoned, "you are bound, not as rulers but as roots." Cheers rose, not of triumph, but of belonging. That night, as the twin suns set and the first stars blinked awake, Yarrick and Valira walked to the edge of the oasis, where the glass dunes now gave way to wildflower fields. Their daughter, born just weeks earlier, with Valira's blue skin, Yarrick's steady gaze, and a shock of fiery red hair already curling at her temples, slept in a sling against her mother's chest. "She'll never know war," Valira murmured. "Maybe not," Yarrick said, wrapping an arm around them both. "But she'll know why we fought to end it." Far below, the heart pulsed, steady, strong, and silent. Not a weapon, not a god, just a reminder that even in the harshest deserts, life finds a way when someone dares to break a spear instead of a soul. Years later, historians would call it the Age of Blooming Spears. Poets would write of the man who caught lightning in his hands and chose to plant it. Children would play beneath the heart trees, weaving crowns of luminous leaves, never knowing the blood that once soaked this ground. But those who lived it, the warriors turned farmers, the orphans turned teachers, the enemies turned family, knew the truth. Peace wasn't the absence of war. It was the presence of love, stubborn as desert roots, bright as a red-haired commander's laugh, and strong enough to hold the weight of a broken world and make it whole again. And in a quiet house at the edge of a blooming desert, Yarok and Valira grew old together, not as legends, but as lovers, parents, and neighbors, watching their children chase fireflies under stars that no longer wept, but sang. Time flowed like the gentle streams now threading through the glass wastes, steady, nourishing, and full of life. Elthar flourished not as an empire, but as a tapestry. Human farmers tilled soil beside blue-skinned botanists. Green-skinned artisans taught children to weave light into cloth. Purple-skinned scholars and white-haired elders from distant moons gathered nightly in open-air forums to debate philosophy, not conquest. The heart of Verithra no longer pulsed like a war drum. It hummed like a lullaby, its energy nurturing crops, healing the sick, and lighting homes with soft, living radiance. Yarok and Valira never sought titles. They were simply the keepers, not of power, but of balance. They walked the fields at dawn, checked on the schoolhouses at midday, and shared evening meals with whoever happened to stop by their modest home built from heartwood and reclaimed starship plating. Their daughter, Lyra, grew like a desert bloom, fierce, curious, and kind. By age 6, she could recite the names of every oasis-born child in 3 languages and had already tamed a sandfox with eyes like molten gold. Mira, restored not just in body but in spirit, became the keeper of memory. She recorded stories, not just of battles, but of small acts of courage. The warrior who shared his last canteen, the trader who gave away her last seed, the child who sang to a frightened refugee. Her archive, carved into living crystal walls, became a pilgrimage site for those seeking hope, not weapons. Lyrian, once a fugitive archivist, now led the Harmony Guild, a coalition of scientists, healers, and artists from dozens of species. Together, they developed ways to share the heart's resonance without draining it, sending gentle pulses to dying worlds to awaken their own slumbering cores. Peace, it turned out, could be cultivated like a garden. One golden afternoon, decades after the day he broke the spear, Yarok sat beneath the great bloom, a tree grown from the first seed Lyra ever planted. Its branches arched over the central plaza, heavy with luminous fruit that glowed like captured sunsets. Valira joined him, her red hair now streaked with silver, her golden eyes still sharp, still warm. She handed him a cup of nectar chilled with ice from the northern glaciers, another miracle the heart had coaxed from the planet. "They're ready," she said softly. He nodded. Today was the day of binding, a tradition they'd begun years ago. Not a wedding, not a coronation, but a renewal. Every 10 years, any couple in Elthar who wished to reaffirm their bond could do so beneath the great bloom. And today, Yarok and Valira would stand once more before their people. Not as symbols, but as witnesses to a love that had weathered war, doubt, and time itself. As the twin suns dipped low, casting the desert in hues of rose and amber, the plaza filled. Not with soldiers, but with families. Not with silence, but with music. Flutes made of bone and crystal, drums stretched with sky serpent hide, voices rising in harmony across species and tongue. Yarok and Valira walked hand in hand to the center. No robes, no crowns, just simple tunics woven by Lyra and her friends, embroidered with threads of heart crystal that shimmered with every step. The elder who had braided their hair so long ago was gone, but her granddaughter now stood in her place. A young woman with green skin, orange braids, and eyes full of fire. She smiled. "Do you still choose each other?" she asked, not as ritual but as truth. Valira looked at Yarok. The lines on his face, the quiet strength in his hands, the way he still held her gaze like she was the only star in his sky. "Every morning," she said. "Every breath." Yarok squeezed her hand. "Even when I burn the stew?" "Especially then," she laughed, and the crowd laughed with her. The elder braided a new lock, Valira's silver-streaked red hair with Jarek's now graying brown, and tied it with a vine from the great bloom. "May your roots grow deeper," she said, "and your branches reach further." That night, under a sky thick with stars and the gentle auroras of a planet at peace, there was feasting, dancing, and storytelling that lasted until dawn. Lyra danced with her sandfox. Mira sang an old Illyrian lullaby, and even Corin, the once skeptical diplomat, played a flute carved from his own ship's wreckage, now a relic of transformation. Years later, when Jarek's steps slowed and Valira's hands trembled slightly with age, they still walked the fields together. They watched their grandchildren. Some blue, some human, some with purple skin and silver eyes, chase fireflies through orchards where glass once lay. They saw Elthar's children become ambassadors, healers, builders of bridges between worlds. And when their time finally came, on the same quiet night, side by side beneath the great bloom, their hands still intertwined. Their people did not mourn with wails, but with song. They planted 2 saplings where they lay, and within a season, the trees grew intertwined, their leaves shimmering blue and gold in the sunlight. The heart pulsed on, the desert bloomed, and in every child who chose kindness over fear, in every spear reforged into a plow, in every alien and human who shared a meal under twin suns, Jarek and Valira lived. Not as legends frozen in stone, but as living breath in a galaxy finally learning to love. Peace had not come easily, but it had come fully, and it was enough. More than enough. It was happy,